today is collaborative efforts for a greener automotive supply chain. Right? Obviously, the theme of this event is about sustainability. But the key word in today's panel discussion is collaboration. I think what we will really focus on is that. I think we've heard all the eminent speakers earlier reinforce the importance of ecosystem coming together in order to achieve these goals. So that's something what we'll focus on. And hopefully at the end of this discussion, you'll have a few points that you can take on from. So let me first bring Squadron Leader Vijay Yadav into the discussion. Just to kick off, what do you think green means, really? When you say green supply chain, green, what do you think it means? Why is it so important?
Yeah, thank you, Atul. So, as per the green goes in terms of supply chain, any industry has almost 60% of the operations revolving around the supply chain. So, greener means, okay, whenever we are into industry, we are consuming something. Some of the resource we are consuming energy, we are transporting our material. People are going across entire gambit of operations requires some energy. So, whether my energy, whether my assets, how much load it's putting on the environment, basically. Is it recyclable? Is it reusable? These all are the aspects of that. So what I feel is okay, like we are spending our resources today. So if we keep on spending our resources indefinitely without having the excellence part driving the things, one day the future generations will have to suffer because of that. So towards that, I feel driving green into the supply chain, into the operations is very essential.
Thanks, Vijay. Neelam, I'll bring you in. So at Deloitte, we interestingly conduct a consumer study every year, and one of the things that Indian customers, actually 68% customers actually said that sustainability is important when they purchase a new vehicle. And they look at OEMs who are doing such initiatives. But surveys aside, I think there's still a perception that this is more a top-down push, that we need to be more sustainable, and customers don't really have a preference. It's not really a pull. Any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Atul, for this question. If you'll ask my opinion, and we work a lot with the MSME and the suppliers and OEM, especially on the sustainability, I believe that this is push as well as there is also a growing consumer demand, as you rightly said. On the push factor, I believe, one thing which comes very, very clear is also the regulatory compliances that's going increasing. We all know that recently PME drive has been launched. There is also a push for the government to adopt on the cleaner technologies. Not only this, all these OEMs and the suppliers who are working in the international market, and Dr. Joydeep was also mentioning that when you are doing a trade or a business with the outside market or international market, you have to declare your green energy practices. You have to declare the what are the ESG implementation you are doing in your business processes. Again, this is a kind of push. And on the consumer demands, I mean, you rightly said there was recently a survey conducted by the Nielsen which says that consumers are ready to pay, 66% of Indian consumers are ready to pay higher price if they find on the product a sustainable push. So I believe, and not only this, if you see even with the EV adoption, if you see just the data of the 2024, especially in the two-wheeler, three-wheeler segment, that has crossed more than 50% is the increase that's been shown. And that's going to be the trend even in the future, that this is how people are adopting. So that is why I say it is not only the push, but there is also a growing pull happening by the consumer awareness and the brand awareness part of the sustainability. This is what I firmly believe in.
So yeah, there is obviously more push than pull right now, but I think there is pull that's catching up. I think that's what I summarized, right? So Kuldeep, thanks for coming here and sharing your thoughts with us. I'd like to bring the topic back to the collaboration. So what are your views on why collaboration is critical?
Thank you. I come from a company, so our name says Kinetic Green, right? So by default, we are very close to the topic. Coming to the collaboration, what I did in my career, as well as what we implemented in Kinetic Green, is we removed a word called vendor. So no one is vendor today, right? And to me personally, vendor seems very offensive. When I say someone vendor, looks like someone selling T or railway platforms. So we are using a word called SCP. We call supply chain partner. So the way people are asking the dealer partner, so we call supply chain partner. So from the day one, when you imagine a product, when you imagine a concept, right? So the same day you start imagining a good supply chain partner, headlight from this company. Maybe the aspiration is that company, but after all the parameters, thorough checking and everything, you land to a different company. So, and today the partners are, for example, especially in EV. So, a typical battery company supplying a battery pack to you, they invest almost 50% of your capex and opex, right? So, they are partner in terms of your risk, your growth, and obviously your sustainability. So, for example, especially for EV, today the buyback of lithium-ion batteries is purely dependent on your supply chain partners. They service. So typically, IC era, the engine was serviced by OEMs, but the EV era, the batteries, the chargers, the motors, the controllers, a lot of electronics is directly serviced by your partners. So if your sales, your expansion, and your partner's expenses are not synced thoroughly, so there will be a blunder. Right? So typically, I always give this example. There's a company, the biggest car company in India. Wherever you launch vehicle, so they ask you how many cities, districts you will be covering in the first phase. So before vehicle goes to that city, your tire goes to that city. So they ensure. So the partnership is quite long. Once we are moving to EV, the partnership is again more stronger and stronger.
Great, thanks, Kuldeep. So we'll build on that concept of partnership because today's theme is all about it. So Samir, just wanted to bring you in here because Kuldeep mentioned about vendors. I mean, obviously we have suppliers, etc. Higher up in the value chain, and for say for an OEM, right? It's like we are dependent on both upstream and downstream partners to be green so that we are called green in a way, right? So some of these points are important. How do you really work backwards, upward in the supply chain with your suppliers to ensure that they are sustainable? Because there is an arm's length relationship after a point of time, but how do you manage that?
So, as all of you know, that automotive industry is more than 200 years old, right? So, the industry has evolved over a time. The supply chains, the value chains have evolved over time. And if you look at it, I mean, we are not just doing the supply chains basically for automotive are really complex one. And then if you see it rolls down from the automotive to the tier 1 to tier 2, tier 3, we go to tier 5, tier 6 levels as well. And so we not only look at partnering with the tier 1s or the division partner, but then we look at even partnering to the tier N level. So if you look at the past, we have been using various initiatives like the recyclable packaging. We are using the packaging which are like returnable packaging. So various companies like CHEP and multiple partners across the world, they help us in this thing, wherein the recyclable packaging is used. Apart from that, Dr. Joydeep talked about ESG, Neelam talked about the ESG. So ESG is one of the upcoming thing right now, wherein we ensure that along with we getting the ESG ranking, we are also ensuring that all of our suppliers get the right ESG ranking. Unless until they have the right ESG scores, they are not allowed to basically empanel on for the new business. So our upcoming BVs, we are making it mandatory that they should have a certain ESG score. So that ESG score is going to help us in going a long way. Plus, apart from that, we have been heavily investing into, as a Mahindra, we have been heavily investing into the last mile mobility. So we have launched a company called Last Mile Mobility. And then in that, we ensure that so the first thing is, whenever we launch a new factory, we ensure that all of our suppliers are co-located. So we ensure that we spend lesser energy, less resources, and we are green when we are sourcing materials. So the suppliers are co-located near to my factory. That is one. Next is when the materials dispatched from my supplier to my factory, we use electric vehicles. So with the LMM we have launched, our focus is on to the electric trucks, the electric small utility vehicles through which they can deliver the period. So we are contributing more towards the greener supply chain. So the packaging, EV transportation, so ESG initiatives, these are the multiple things which we are using for address.
Very, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that perspective. Praveen, you can get the mic. So I think Kuldeep mentioned about shared investments as one strategy. We also heard about us influencing ESG scores, etc. So it seems like it's not an informal arrangement anymore between us and the ecosystem. It's like you're kind of putting skin in the game. You're bringing partnerships, bringing it alive, right? So what are your thoughts? Is that how it's going to go?
Yeah, the word collaborative, and the Kuldeep rightly said, the supply chain partner. We are no more vendors or customer like. So supply chain partner, the word itself means the kind of a collaboration we have with our all stakeholders. And ESG, we have a bigger role to play within the society as well. So I will emphasize on the basics of a PDCA cycle. So kind of a first, whenever you have a kind of a strategic partnership with any of your value chain partner, first stage will be you define the objectives, the goals which you are targeting with your partner, and the mutual benefits. You list down the mutual benefits, kind of investment you are going to do, and of course the investment has to be not only in terms of money, the technology know-how, the human resource part, kind of a training, upgradation of your vendor partner. Then risk and rewards are equally important. What are the risks we are carrying with this change, or with this any partnership or any initiative you have to protect the ESG, your milestones, or a kind of to protect the environment. And finally, the transparency and the trust is very important. Whenever you have a kind of a vendor base and the supply chain partners in your entire value chain, the trust and transparency is equally important. Many times, the most of the suppliers or partners, they always take the back seat in fear of passing off more cost savings to the OEMs. This typically happens in the auto component industry. Whenever we have a kind of a VA idea, so they have a kind of a resistance to share with the OEMs, that they are afraid if I save a rupees 2 per piece, the OEMs will definitely ask for 1 rupees directly, a straight away reduction from them. So kind of a trust and transparency is very important, and the communication, the monitoring, as we do kind of a PDCA. So continuous monitoring of your progress, any initiative you are aligning with your strategic partner, and of course a win-win situation, kind of sharing the benefits, risk, rewards as well. That will enhance the strategic partnership with the entire value chain partners.
Perfect. Thanks for that. I think what you touched upon, and I think I'll get Neelam in here, is like if you look at PDCA, it's like the entire value chain, right from say a plan, source, make, and buy. Every step there is collaboration. Every step there could be some sort of a interim scorecard arrangement that we can do, partnerships that we can do, all of that stuff that we can really kind of drive sustainability. So even on the sourcing part, right? I think we started that start part of the value chain. Even sourcing of raw materials sustainably is a big question mark, right? I think it's something that you don't have a view on that. How do you do that?
So thank you, Atul, for this question. I actually love sourcing question. Being headed the sourcing of few OEMs in India and outside. One few experience that I wanted to share, and I might take a minute more to answer this. If you talk about sourcing on the raw material, if I talk about the challenges, let me talk about the challenges first and then we'll come. And I don't know how many of people here are actually coming from procurement background. But today it's one thing is, as a sourcing person, first thing is always about the cost. Our target starts with year-on-year cost reduction. That's the first goal that we get in. Now, when it comes about having a sustainable raw material and also reducing a cost, And when we have to, especially with the Indian mindset, when we have to make a choice, I believe we are always given with cost is your prime. You have to reduce so many millions every year. And that is where, when then the procurement manager goes for a sustainable procurement, that's where it actually sustainability then takes a lower seat out there, because he or she still sits with that cost reduction. Not only this, if I talk about the second, supply chain transparency. If I have to ask any one of you, can you trace the origin of the raw material that you are using till the last mile? I believe there will be very few organizations, because you still cannot trace the material that's coming from tier 3, tier 4, or those. And if you have to trace for whether they are using the sustainable practices or not, you might not find a supply chain which is transferable from the origin of the material to the user, where you can actually see, oh yeah, I have been using the sustainable practices throughout the material. So these are some of the challenges, and regulatory pressures I've already talked about. But that doesn't mean that has to limit us. And while working as a procurement heads, there is few things which I want to share from my experience basis. Is one is, it's very very important to design for longevity. It doesn't only come from the sourcing side. So when you are designing, when the products components are getting designed, start designing for the longevity. Dr. Jadhav was talking about end of life vehicle. Now we all are riding in the halls of EV, but we know that after 4 or 5 years, when we have to replace the batteries, or because we know the batteries performance are going to drop down, what are we going to do with those number of batteries, especially if that is going to come with the 2 and 3 wheelers? Are we going to use it or reduce? I mean, where are we going to, having those applications? Maybe we have to design something for the application of it, or we have to design batteries which, their performance can be there for a longer time, because this is important to work it out. Third part, I believe what we can do is leveraging our digital technologies, because still in the procurement there are a lot of things, especially from the order, RFP, to the time it is going in the spares to with the final consumers. There are part of things which are in digital. There is something which are the contracts which still sitting in the drawer of the people. And then when the next person comes, they hardly are aware what was the clauses, whether even they have a sustainability clauses also included. I don't know if anyone of you. And fourth thing I wanted to tell you, sustainable procurement policies. If I had to ask the audience here, how many of you know that your organization have a sustainable procurement policy? Can you raise your hands? I mean, just a quick check whether you have a sustainable procurement policy, even written or implementation. So we'll talk later maybe as a part of your business process. So this is where the responses are. So the thing is, and when you talk about, we are all talking about sustainability. The point is, we are still on a very, very upper layer when we have to go in depth of it. When we are talking about this, we have to go in depth of actually implementing them as a part of our business process. And I believe fourth point is OEM has a very big role to play. Taking the supplier on board, because when we work with a lot of MSME suppliers, many a times we realize that people are not even aware more than the sustainability terms. How to implement it, and then how to do a checklist for this is this thing. But OEMs having the big, good knowledge database, and they are already updating, I believe they have to play a role. So when you call me about the sourcing raw material, I believe it is about everything of this time. So there are challenges, but then there are solutions also. That is that.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Neelam. I at least believe that if there is a pull from the customers, today it is always combined with, if it has to be affordable, right? And as a result, even if you look at EVs, the kind of traction we are getting, a lot of it probably could also be because there are incentives, there are tax breaks, etc. There is obviously people hearing from each other, but eventually it's a responsibility that we need to drive, right? So, and this whole thing should become a hygiene factor, right? It need not necessarily be something that we use as a selling point anymore. It's hygiene, and it's like built in as part of our DNA. So anything that is sold is sustainable. I think we need to get there for sure. But I'll just summarize what you said. There are 2-3 things very interesting that you mentioned. One was on the traceability part of it, right? I think there are so many suppliers and so many tiers of suppliers. Second, you also mentioned about how things start with regard to having those policies in the first place. Praveen, one solution that could be is obviously use of more technology for traceability, right? We've been hearing a lot about track and trace, and especially this came because of warranty actually. The first time people started thinking of track compliance is warranty because people are making claims. Is that valid or not? But if you really roll it back and say that if I really need to use technology, etc., is that possible? How effective it is?
Yeah, I can share the my current experience. The earlier I worked with the Tata Motors for 11 years in the passenger car segment only. Yes, of course, the OEM started basically scanning the barcodes on the each child part being submitted or being supplied by their vendor partners. So that started with the you can say the OEMs. The major player was the Maruti Suzuki to initiate this. Then other OEMs followed. So basically, the need created that time itself to have their vehicle with the child parts detailed the barcode and the stickers. That started the journey started from there. So the traceability when we have in our manufacturing setup in a tier 1 or tier 2, tier 3. So traditionally we add a root cards, bin cards, then the many different types of the systems, internal systems the other companies have. So the best will be definitely the individual part will have the marking, the identification. The production punching itself should have the identification for the shift, the serial number, the machine sale number, and of course, if it is visible, the operator code as well. So that kind of individual parts. We are in the drive lines and we manufacture the many forge components machined in-house with our forgings coming from the forgers. Of course, as forge, we will have the heat codes on the individual part, but after machining, we in GKN at least we have a kind of a individual part identification with within the sale itself, the you can say consolidated with the production sequence so that every part will get okayed only after the production punching is done. And that the at the end of the drive shop assembly sale, we will have the multiple parts. So if I give an example of a drive shop, it will have two ends of joints and the one axle bar. So all these three parts, basic the joints, will have the outer part numbers engraved on the forging components, and one assembly of individual drive shaft assembly will create one single barcode which will be scanned at the OEMs. So that the data storage, then the requirements, the IITF requirements of the storage of data, then now the electronically we can save all the data through this barcodes. So that is the real traceability for a direct end user. Owner of any car will have that kind of a traceability. Of course, it will be with the OEM, but we can track at the very stage of the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 level. And yes, of course, as the Neelam mentioned, there are the challenges and the limitations on the disclosure of the sources. Many vendor partners are reluctant to say to have the dual sources in case of any urgencies or whenever we have find any shortages with the one source, then switch to the other raw material source. So that kind of a challenges will continue. But at a level 1 or level 2, definitely we will have a kind of a traceability which will suffice the end customers' requirements. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for that, Praveen.
Just like to add,
Please.
I'll just like to add one of the thought process which is very relevant what Neelam was carrying out. Whenever we do a commercial analysis, just because of the cost or just because of the criticality of the time, we step back looking at the greener part, sustainability part. We look at, okay, this is going to increase my risk, this is going to increase my cost, okay, my timeline is going to hit. So what I suggest over here is a thought which everybody should carry around. Okay, whether we should have some metrics around to include a deferred gains and a deferred losses because of what we are doing today. So can we build around some metrics around it? Okay, whenever we do a comparative statement, we check, okay, why not to have a deferred, okay, what is the deferred impact? So this battery is going to go off after, say, 5 years, 7 years. So what is the impact? Okay, this this manufacturing is using a battery which is guaranteeing 7 years of life, whereas the other one is giving 5 years of life. But the cost of 5 years is always lesser than one. But the moment we do a buy decision, we say, okay, let's do 5 years. So we should have a concept of deferred, something deferred, which we occasionally miss out. I never see this happening. So that is what I wanted to suggest over here.
No, perfect. Thanks for adding that. I think what is happening also in the industry is that we are trying to promise a few things, right? Saying that look, we are going to give you 8 years warranty, 7 years warranty. All of these are probably sound basis cycles of the battery and all of that. So it's probably based on research, but on ground we don't really know in the sense like what is really going to be the output performance, what's really going to be the exact thing. We don't have too much of precedence, I would say, and that's why consumers are also worried, saying that okay, should I do? And that's where I think some of this, may come in handy, in kind of pulling that through. So just getting Samir into it now. You mentioned about last mile mobility and other initiatives that you and the organization have taken. Now, in this case, are you seeing only this is more like incremental improvements that are coming, or because see after a point of time you can always make small gains, right, by moving from say an ICE vehicle to an EV vehicle for logistics. There will be some gains, but are these substantial or are they just incremental? So do we need to do something bigger? Just wanted to hear you.
Yeah, as you rightly said, we need to do something bigger. We need basically government policies around basically charging infrastructure. So although we have now, many OEMs have launched EVs in India, but then the charging infrastructure is not enough. So if you go to buy an EV, your question would be, I can roam around within the town, but if I have to go out, then obviously if I want to go 200, 400 kilometers out, then you might reach there but may not be able to come back, right? So because of the range of the EV and the charging infra. So obviously the government plays a very important role in terms of the rolling out, the implementation of this. In addition to what points Neelam mentioned about in terms of the traceability of the material, and then about the recycling of the material, let me acquire some points over there. So in terms of traceability, earlier OEMs were, if you ask me, they were least bothered. They were worried about other tier ones and the tier twos, tier threes. They never bothered. But then COVID taught us a lot. In COVID, we saw that some supplier in Romania, he is not able to give material, and because of which your entire factory is down, because some raw material is coming from him to some of your tier 4 and tier 4 is manufacturing that part, tier 3 and tier 1, tier 1 and so on.
Semiconductors also big.
Semiconductors is one of the great examples. So Ukraine had some issues about some gas, and then because of which the complete factories went down. So it has affected production drastically. So that has really opened up the eyes of the OEMs in terms of mapping the entire value chain and going down to them and understanding what all raw materials they are sourcing. And then so if you look at all of our newer programs, what we are doing is essentially whenever we float an RFQ, we get a complete value chain mapping. That okay, I am buying from tier 1, tier 1 is buying which all child parts right to the raw material level from which tier N. And then based on that, we do the mapping. For the environment concerns, obviously the ESG is playing a very big role. There has been a push from, so like we are partnering up with Volkswagen for for the EV platforms. So with that, there is a lot of push from the Europe. If we have to export the products to Europe, then obviously we need to have that complete mapping. And then obviously whether that is coming from the green materials, whether we are not even impacting nature by any chance, that we have to be completely sure. So we are building up the complete value chain mapping. Another part is about the recycling of the materials. So we are working towards, there are joint research, joint work which is going on, which is about the solid state batteries, where the batteries can prolong the usage beyond 5 years, as Neelam mentioned. And also with respect to the recycling of the batteries. So although the battery will go down after 5 years, but then are there any methods by which we can reuse the battery, either for the automotive or for any other usage, maybe it's a household or something. So all these things are OEMs are working jointly. We are like nobody work with particular partners of it, and
So that's a wonderful point to bring Kuldeep in, because see, we call it like Rex, REX, right, which is no reference to the dinosaur, but it's something that it's recycle, reuse, remanufacture, etc., etc. So, what's your view from a Kinetic perspective? Are you actively participating in that circular part of it?
So, first of all, I would like to clear this myth. What will happen after 3 years or 5 years of battery life? So, thing is, what Samir mentioned rightly. So, battery will not go anywhere, right? So, maybe the performance will be lesser. Then this will be, we call it second use, third use, fourth use. So, till today, couple of lithium-ion batteries are 4+ years old. People are selling for last more than 4 years. So maybe the consumer is selling the vehicle or replacing the battery to a user who doesn't need 100 kilometers of range every day, right? So typically, what I practically see, battery cell life is more than 10 years. Nothing happens to a battery. Thanks to the tighter norms, so since last year, we had batteries norms where the battery is fully safe. There is no fire incident in last 1 year in the country. So government is also improving. Parallelly, you will find we are getting different solutions. Typically today, all electric two-wheelers are changing from NMC to LFP, whatever reason. Obviously, the cost is one. Second one is the safety. So they are okay to compromise on the energy density. So, and I find reusing the LFP cell is much easier than an NMC cell. So, industry technology is improving a lot. And for sure, if you see just the data today, there are 50 companies already registered in India for lithium-ion battery recycling. And they are not getting sufficient battery at all, because batteries are not going for recycling. These are going for second, third, and fourth uses. So, if you see, there is a norm in lead-acid battery, the manufacturer has to buy the similar amount of lead from the aftermarket,
Correct.
right? And this is a fully fledged implemented law for last multiple years, and we are able to do that. Because of whatever reason, fortunately, unfortunately, we as a country, so we are very much into recycling. So even a small thing, I'm sure this bottle will go to someone and someone will earn from this bottle, right? So recycling is very good in our country. So if you see, most of the plastic in sea are from the developed countries, not from the developing countries, because we don't throw even a single metal or plastic or anything which can be reused again and again and again. So I generally give this example. So typically in a middle income group of families, so a child uses a shirt or t-shirt, then his younger brother or sister is going to use that shirt or t-shirt, and finally this goes to clean my two-wheeler bike, right, or my scooter. So we never buy a fresh cloth or a duster to clean my bike, irrespective, right? So we are very good in recycling by nature. We are good by nature, by our culture, for sustainability. For example, when I found this badge can destroy my shirt, so I thought it's better to be without this badge, right? And I thought I was the only one, but I really find a few of my friends are also not able to use that badge because they are more concerned for their shirt instead of their identity, right? So I'm very much confident. Whatever is the developed countries are doing, they are dumping their castings, their forgings, all their chrome plating to developing countries. But we will be very good in recycling for sure.
Thanks, Kuldeep. I think you touch upon some points here that obviously different countries, given their different societal constructs, cultures, etc., have different degrees of problems. But there are obviously some of it also being enforced. Like I mean, we heard about EPR, which is external producer responsibilities, where OEMs are required to necessarily recycle certain percentage of certain materials. Do you really think that kind of regulation, it's an open question, whoever wants to pick up, do you think such kind of push from the government saying that mandatorily you do this much, is this something that it's good, maybe we want to sustain on?
So today this is not applicable to EV industry, but I'm sure this will be very soon. So the industry is in developing phase. So every year they will impose a new law, a new regulation for battery certification. FAME they are keep on reducing almost every year now. So by default this is published. Today the FAME is 10,000 per two-wheeler maximum. Till March this was 20,000. Next year this will be 5,000. So I'm sure they are reducing all the subsidies, incentives, and there will be tighter norms. Or on the other side, OEMs will be very much interested to buy those batteries back, because we only talk about cell, but they are component in the battery pack which can be used multiple times. The life is infinite. For example, BMS. For example, the hardware, bus bars, and the battery cell holders, and etc.
So one more question.
Thought process on this. Basically, looking at the kind of market which we're going into, batteries and all. So I feel that there's another way to solve this problem of battery. So why can't we think of having a battery as a service rather than battery as an ownership? So industry is really needs to collaborate here. Okay, can we think of a modular battery which fits into everything? So if my system is say a standard battery is 1.2 volt, I require 48 volt. So every manufacturer can use a single battery. And just like the filling stations which are there, because what is the biggest challenge nowadays into the trucking industry is the driver or the trucker is most interested how fast my material can get delivered. So if my truck has to travel say 2,000 odd kilometers, he doesn't have a time to wait for charging time. We may say okay, he can sleep, he can take a rest, but ideally, if I look at the Indian market, the kind of a sleep or kind of these people don't even sleep for more than 2.5 hours. So that much time is not sufficient. So we need, I say that we need to think on collaborating how we can get it as a battery as a service rather than ownership. It will solve my another problem of reverse logistics for getting these batteries to back to the recycling plants. So I solved two problems with this. That is what I feel with this.
And in fact, some OEMs have already started selling cars without batteries. So
exactly. I was about to mention about the MG Motors. The recently the new car, the EV they launched with the rental proposal. That's the exactly you were all mentioning. So being a OEM, they must be having a kind of a infrastructure to handle this kind of return logistics, and definitely optimize and the more efficient way they can do kind of a charging and the back to replacement of the discharge battery. So yes, OEMs are working on that, and definitely MG has taken you can say a lead on that.
Yeah, and I think other angle to it is also to keep the vehicle affordable, right?
Because correct. That will definitely boost the sales.
Yeah, so the upfront cost goes down, and you're making it into more from a fixed to a variable cost. So that really helps. I have two more points to cover with this group. So one is, I think obviously I spoke about EPR, but scrappage seems to be a big push, right, that we're doing, and we want to kind of, and that's where collaboration is also happening a lot, because you're having all these collection centers that are being set up, to kind of get the scrap material back into the system in some way or the other. So there's a lot of work happening in order to build an ecosystem and build collaboration. But at this moment, I think it's still a little bit unorganized. I think that's what is probably the issue plaguing some of this. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is it like something that you see as a challenge going forward? Like, you want to see more organizations, more large companies coming into these fields? Anyone open question?
I just want to put one thought.
Yeah.
So, very rightly said by Vijay also, and I'll come to the scrappage point and then maybe I'll. We are talking about two-wheelers, and we said whether they can be modular battery that can fit in all the two-wheelers model. Really, that requires all the OEMs to come together to define their battery capacity that they want. Today, if we see, it is all, even with the differences, there are differential. So that is what is happening, then it is becoming that battery is actually the ownership of them in that company. So we need to maybe create a joint forum where the batteries is becoming a third part or a service model where I go to a charging station, I just replace my battery, whichever model I am driving, and this thing. And second, coming on the scrappage, this thing, reapplication of it, which I believe you're talking about, for the other this thing, that's very, very important. Or designing with the materials that has a longer battery performances that will reduce on the scrappage part of it. Or if we have to scrap, we need to, because with the battery we are also dealing with the hazardous material that needs to be looked in very, very carefully when we are talking about lithium or with this thing. How are we going to do this? Because that is where our ROHS and others compliances will be forced upon. So that needs to be looked upon with the detail. And I believe OEMs are already having a discussion how should we do this and how should we doing the scrappage management policy. And I believe that also needs to be defined somewhere how it should be done. But and bigger question here is whose ownership is that? Is it OEM? Is it the service or is it the person who is the user? So that clarity also needs to be brought down.
One very good thing is all of us have at least one mobile phone, right? And the smartphone is more than 10 years old in the country. And when we started with 4 5 type of charging points, right? Charger, output points. Thin pin, thick pin, very thick pin, right? Then
Patli pin, moti pin.
A type, B type, C type, right? So even today, if you see, Apple remains always different. So they don't go for a charging which is very much similar to the other phones. All the other companies, typically all the Chinese companies especially, they came to C type of charging port. And there is one more port which is still slowly they will be obsoleting it. So the point here is there will be OEMs, they want to differentiate their product. So they will always come, irrespective their charging infra, the fast charging infra is there or not, they will have the fast charging port on the two-wheeler. So, but I'm 100% sure because the very big giants are coming to battery swapping. They are putting a lot of capex, and battery is a capex. So typically, the largest player in the Taiwan, the successful player in the Taiwan, they came to India also. Their battery swapping, typically one battery is swapped maximum 1.5 times, and typically one battery one can discharge, irrespective if this is two-wheeler, three-wheeler, or four-wheeler. Maximum, if you are running on full throttle, you can discharge a battery in 4 hours, right? So still, out of 24 hours, the maximum is obviously 26, and you can charge battery in 1 hour. So instead of up to 3, their maximum swapping is 1.5. That to a particular location in the major city. So coming to our scenario, very big companies are coming. I don't want to name, but the very big companies will be putting battery swapping stations. There's definitely PLI. When sufficient batteries will be available, so definitely no one wants to own those batteries, and this will be consumed as a fuel per kilometer basis.
I had one or two more topics, but I think we are slightly out of time, so I'll probably conclude. I think so. Quick rapid fire from each of you. Just one sentence as to what you feel is going to be the biggest turning moment, or what is going to drive that transformation when it comes to collaboration in green supply chain. You can go from Pravin.
Yeah, I will rather say we are focusing more on greener. I will rather prefer for as one of the we in speech we have seen we should focus more on the operational efficiencies, how to reduce, recycle, reuse, and with the optimized productivity and the utilization of the resources, we can definitely contribute more to the greener supply chain and more collaborative vendor partners.
Operational efficiency
Yes.
Biggest.
Yeah.
So
I'll repeat the same point. Like I feel that changing the matrix of evaluation, like deferred gains and deferred losses, which should be a part of commercial evaluations going forward, if we really want to make the things greener and greener.
deferring of.
I'd say have the transparent supply chain and do implement the sustainable procurement. Procurement is the biggest cost and the biggest implementer in the supply chain that will help you to increase on your greener part. So do that.
So what I feel is like industry and definitely automotive industry has got enough experience onto this overall, the value chain and then various vestiges in that. So what I think is we should create a digital twin. All OEMs should create a digital twin. They should share data, and then this optimization of this digital twin will help to reduce the vestiges, moving towards the more data.
So digital twins, what is it?
Yeah.
3 T's: transparency, technology, and trust.
All 3 T's. Okay. Wonderful. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your participation. It was enriching discussion. Atulji, can we take a couple of questions if there are? Please, please. So, yeah, sure.
Hi, my name is Shirish Kulkarni. Now we dwell more upon the EV part, the recycling part. That's a great insight where we saw views coming from OEMs as well as the whole supply chain. I would like to just a little bit zoom out and talk about ESG or sustainability as a bigger problem that we are trying to address and look at for the supply chain. And are there drives? Now the question or the perspective I would like to ask is: are there drives where these matrices which are getting defined for the OEM, either for are they back to back getting transferred or defined all through the supply chain as we are calling them as partners, right? So is that handshake happening where that supporting hand is also extended to make it happen? Because that's where the collaboration is going to happen. Talk about operational efficiencies, talk about carbon footprint, talk about anything. Talk about 5.0 also, which actually extends towards ESG as a direction. So that's something as a perspective you can share.
Can I answer this? Maybe I'll address a part of it. So when we talk about ESG, E is the prominent part that comes with us. Everybody talks about environment. Somebody was talking about it is the 3 pillars in the sustainability that are important, and we have to give the importance to all the 3, and then I'll come to the implementation. So your environment pillar, your social pillar, and your governance pillar, which stands for ESG. And I just wanted to tell the audience here, and ESG and sustainability, we use this term interchangeably, but there is a subtle difference also that sustainability is a much bigger piece and ESG is a part of this where we talk about these 3 pillars of it. Now coming to the ESG implementation, which I was saying, we are knowing about. Everybody talks about sustainable products, sustainable consumers, sustainable supply chain, greener supply chain. But let's talk about. I'll just tell you an example of it. Now, when you are onboarding a vendor, very simple. Onboarding a vendor into a part of your supply chain or as a part of your procurement. What are we looking as a part of that? How can it make me or help me to have a sustainable procurement? Creating that checklist. Okay, how is that vendor practices are there? How is the labor or other ethical sourcing part of this vendor as of this thing there? Am I rating that vendor? And not only that, even giving the vendor a performance report card that this is how you have worked on this. That it is not that you have to become only a best cost supplier to me, but you also have to become a best sustainable and a quality supplier to me. So I think we have to go to a step 2 and step 3. Awareness, I believe, is now okay, everybody's aware. But getting the implementation is the portion that we see companies struggle. Especially, I see supplier on the vendor side, because how should they implement it? That is where they are like, so we need to create frameworks. There are companies, and there are, I believe, companies like Deloitte also might be working in to create this framework. How should you implement this as a part? And that is, I believe, there's a lot of work that has to be done yet, because they're still not done. Consulting companies, OEMs, they are coming up, and that's where the work is going on for those implementation. And that is the second part. Implement these sustainable practices as the part of your business functions. So you should have in HR, you should have in procurement, your manufacturing, your quality function, everywhere. And then measuring of it. So that is why now it is part of evolving those policies or the practices, and then have a KPI to measure that. That is how you will go to the implementation stage of it. Maybe others also can add it.
Yeah, I'll just add to it. So, very good question. And ESG is basically playing a big role nowadays. For you to get an ESG score as an OEM, it's not that only you are following the ESG practices, but it has to be perpetuated down the line. So that's a framework of ESG. So ESG framework insists that not only you, but everyone follows the ESG practices. they have the enough scores, and then obviously then the tier 2 and tier 3 and so on. So ESG is definitely going to help in future.
So I'll just add one point to that question, because I think we've been talking a lot about upstream, but I think baby steps. But there are OEMs who are also thinking of downstream. I know that there's a concept called green dealerships, right? So it's not just about the product; it's also about the experience and how, even downstream there is a responsibility. So we know some of them are happening, but it's still
So 3 years, 5 years.
that. One more question, please. One more question.
Hi, my name is Sachin Deshpande. I'm founder and CEO of Eaton India Technologies. My question is, we all are agreeing to the point that ESG is important, but a very important point which is missing actually is about the cost, right? And so as in business, we always talk about unit economics, right? So in terms of that, are the industry as well as both upstream as well as downstream is also looking at a cost and where we are, and because a lot of initiatives are deferred because it is not able, the organization is not able to sustain that cost, right? So I just wanted to have your perspective on that.
You rightly said, and in fact, when I was speaking earlier, I said, especially in India, what happens is when there is a choice that I have to make, and especially I believe if anybody is in the sourcing here where they have to procure the material, when there is something on the ESG and there is a matrix on the cost. Cost is the first matrix that has been put to us. Okay, Aapko, you have to get a year-on-year reduction of this percentage, or this many million of cost you have to reduce. The point here which I wanted to make, that if you are implementing ESG, think of a longer term on the KPI. Now, tomorrow, if I'm having a an energy efficient instrument or the component or the lighting at my, or I'm using a renewable sources of energy at my factory, there is a long term cost benefit of it. If I am looking for an instant cost benefit, next year I am going to get this cost reduction, this might not come. And I believe that is where a drive from leadership has to come. That okay, you have to choose between this thing, but don't compromise everything onto this ESG. Keep a matrix that is still live. Because think of a long-term cost. We are not here to have the business only for 1 or 2 or next 2 3 years. It is a longer term in the vision of 5 to 7 years that we have to see. And second, which is more important, if you have to exist in a global market. Today we know the European market, the kind of stringent norms they have on sustainability, especially when you are supplying the material there. So if that is the demand coming from there, and that is exactly the push thing that is coming on, so we have to have. So it is a choice, it is a conscious choice of a long-term cost gain versus a short-term gain when we are implementing on the sustainability things. And that is the choice I believe a company has to make for their longer-term sustainability too.
Yeah, so as Vijay also mentioned during the course, we don't need to look at the short term, but we need to look at the long term, and we don't need to calculate the cost in silos. Okay, for what cost I'm buying it for, but then what is the cost of disposal? What is the cost of let's say you are buying material in a corrugated box? What is the cost of scrapping it? What is the cost to the environment? So we have to look at it in the long term, and as Neelam mentioned, leadership plays a very big role in that. So while leadership is putting up the targets, putting the goals to you, it should not be short term, but it should be long term.
Thank you. It was great moderating this panel, and thanks for the active contribution.